My name's Dale Comstock. Former 20-year Army veteran, spent 10 years in the Delta Force, 5 years in Special Forces as a Green Beret light and heavy weapons expert, 4 years in 82nd Airborne Division as a paratrooper and a long-range reconnaissance scout, and also did 9 years with the government as a paramilitary contractor for them. What I want to do real quick is I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I wrote a book called American Badass that I published in July. And the book is about inspiring and mentoring young men. I use my life stories as a medium to do that. The book is a memoir, but I didn't want the book to be all just about me as much as I wanted it to be about you, the reader, and the potentially the viewer if it's ever made it to a movie. Let's hope so, right? So that's what my book was about. But what I wanted to really do is introduce somebody today that was my mentor, the guy that inspired me. And if you read my book, you'll find out that my hero was my father. My father, he's the one that cultivated a certain mindset in me and taught me to be a man, taught me to be accountable and responsible for the things I do in life. He really taught me to become, a young warrior, so to speak. When I joined the Army in 1981, I went to the 82nd Airborne Division. I became part of the long-range reconnaissance platoon of the 82nd Airborne Division. And in 1983, I ended up at Camp McCall for some training out there. Camp McCall is at Fort Bragg, and it's the Special Forces training compound. While I was out there going through the survival training that we were doing, there was a guy out there by the name of Gary O'Neill standing next to me. Gary O'Neill was a hand-to-hand combat instructor. I was a young 20-year-old soldier, Spec 4, actually I think I was like E3 at the time, and came out to the hand-to-hand pit one cold winter morning with the rest of my platoon. We circled around him, and Mr. O'Neill began talking to us about the combat mindset as it related to hand-to-hand. And the first thing he did, to my shock and awe, was pull out a bicycle spoke, pull the skin out of his neck, and drive the bicycle spoke through his neck. Then he picked up a bucket of water, had a rope tied to it, and wrapped it around the bicycle spoke, picked the bucket up and started swinging it around. And then if that wasn't crazy enough, after he pulled the spike out of his neck, he laid down and let another guy drive over him with a quarter-ton Jeep. And I thought, man, what the heck? And so this was kind of our introduction to Mr. Gary O'Neill's combat or hand-to-combat program. He's got quite a bit of experience. As I learned a lot of things about him, I found out that he had walked through 77 ambushes in Vietnam. He's got over 300 kills, many with a knife. The guy is legendary. And I remember standing there in awe looking at him going, you know what? That's the soldier I want to be. And that's what I want to aspire to be the rest of my career. And so I've always followed Mr. Gary O'Neill over the 20 years. We actually have a mutual friend, and through him I was able to keep up with what he was doing in life. But he was the guy that made the first impression on me how to be a soldier and the soldier I wanted to be, and it's brought me to where I am today. Someone would call me an American badass, but the reality is I'm not a badass. I'm actually a good guy. Some would say a good ass, but that's not what it's about. For me, what it was about was being a good soldier, being the best soldier I could be, the best American I could be, the best patriot, father, husband, and brother and son. And I think that thanks to Mr. O'Neill as my mentor, I was able to do most of those things. But what I wanted to introduce now is Mr. Gary O'Neill, who wrote the book American Warrior, that was published around the same time my book came out, which was American Badass. So really what you have and what you're looking at is, young bull, although I'm not that young anymore, and the old bull, who's a lot older than me. So, Mr. O'Neill, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All
right.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Dale, I appreciate the kind words, buddy. But you're epitome of American Warrior. I seen you when you first came in as a young man and to where you've grown up to be right now. And it makes me proud to see guys like you that I brought up and helped Ryan. And I'm not the only one, you talked about your dad and you had other uncles running around, that helped out. But what we want to talk about, and we all talk about, is we're Americans, we're American warriors. We're fighting for the greatest country in the world, and we're the greatest fighters in the world. Not fight anybody that says different. I don't care who they are. And we're talking about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I call the Bill of Rights the Citizen Rule Book. Okay, that's the Citizen Rule Book, is the Bill of Rights. And the Second Amendment, to be able to carry weapons. That Second Amendment was designed for the patriots of America to keep control over the society and control the problems in their area, and also protect we the people from crooked government. Okay, to protect our freedoms from tyranny. And I got a lot of experience. My family, my 5th grade grandfather was in the Frontier Rangers in the 1750s. His 2 sons and himself signed the oath of allegiance to America and fought in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. I've had an O'Neill, if grandfather or uncle, granduncles, has fought down to me, has fought in every conflict this country's been in. I've had relations in those battles. And I am not going to allow anybody to be able to take care of our what destroyed our ancestors, what they fought and died for. They gave up their wealth, they gave up their families, they gave up everything so we can live free. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I teach, and that's why I walk the path of the warrior. And to protect we the people. And it's necessary for guys like us, the 1%ers. It's like Dale was talking about. You got 1% of the American populace that serve in the military. Then you got 1% of those that go to airborne school, become a paratrooper. Then you got 1% of them that go to Ranger School or Special Forces. And then you got 1% of them that go to a higher level of proficiency in special operations, or we call the dark side, the Tier 1 units. And then once you're in the Tier 1 units, it's to be the 1% of that unit. You know, and that's when you walk the path of the warrior. You know, we talk about weapons, we're talking about commo, medical, any of that type of training, SEER training. It's all tools of the trade. The main thing it is to walk the path of the warrior or patriot of America, the fighter of the Constitution of the United States, to protect the Constitution of the United States. That's the oath we took to protect we the people and our history from tyranny. Is a lifelong commitment to self-discipline, cultivation of the will to outstay the enemy in his own environment, and be able to weigh the consequences of our actions and the responsibility of our actions. If we do the action, and when I talk about the actions and stuff, you got these kids out here creating all kinds of havoc around the country here that they have no discipline. You know, if you can't have discipline at home, in school, in the adolescence, you can't have discipline when you become in the womanhood and manhood. Because once you transform from adolescence to woman or manhood, the discipline is out and motivation is out the window. It's self-discipline and self-motivation. To be able to control your emotions, control your actions, and be able to weigh the consequences for your actions. You know, and I teach that in high schools. I teach it with a lot of young people because we're having problems in schools. We're having problems with a lot of our young people now is because they don't have the discipline to control their actions because they have no respect for themselves. And if you don't have respect for yourself, how can you respect others? And if you don't have any respect for life, then what are you going to do? Okay, so that's pretty much what we have to do, you know, is we got to train our children. It's a responsibility. The hardest job there is in the world, and the hardest job there is in America, is to be a father, a good father, and a good mother. Because once you have kids, you have no responsibility for yourself. It all goes to the training of your kids, so you can bring them up to know what's the difference between right and wrong. I was brought up as a mixed blood with Native American and Irish, you know, so I understand the problems you have when you're a kid. Because the whites didn't like you because you was Indian, the Indians didn't like you because you was white. When I grew up, I didn't like anybody. You know, and that's why I joined the Army, because there wasn't any of that racial problems in the Army. Everybody stuck together because when you're in the foxhole in a life or death situation, It's a band of brothers, okay? It's brothers in arms.
Tell them how old you were when you went in.
And, well, when I...
You got to tell them. It's amazing.
The problems I had when I was a kid, I got tired of the ridicule and stuff. And so I ran away from home. When I ran away from home, I was over at my cousin's house, my older cousin, and I seen his birth certificate there. So I went and took his birth certificate, went down and joined the Army at 15 underneath my cousin's name. Until my cousin joined the Army in '68, then they found out there was 2 Butch O'Neills in the Army, you know? So they found out my cousin was real and I was using his name, so I got booted out. So I got booted out in '68, August '68. In January '69, I got drafted and came back in the Army. And I've stayed in the Army and worked with for the government for 43 years. And I'm still training in subcontracts and stuff, working with high schools and training our troops. Because one of my mentors that put me in the Hall of Fame, he didn't put me in, he recommended me for the Hall of Fame, the Ranger Hall of Fame. It's the most prestigious Hall of Fame that this country has when it comes to Army, okay? And his name was Robert Howard. Bob Howard, Colonel Howard, was the highest decorated soldier probably in the history of this country. He was up for 3 Congressional Medal of Honors, but you can only have 1 in a lifetime. So I found out, one day I found out he was in the hospital dying of cancer, pancreatic cancer. So I called him up and I got the floor nurse and I just wanted to leave a message. So I left a message saying, you know, tell Colonel Howard, Chief O'Neill called and sent his prayers for a speedy recovery because we got a rucksack march in 3 days, you know? And his son calls me back, says my dad wants to talk to you. So I waited and Bob came back. Bob was my mentor, he was my hero, and most of all, he was my friend. And he told me, he says, young Ranger, don't say a word. I'm in no pain. I've made my amends with my maker, and it's my time. But you, on the other hand, has been trained by some of the best combatants this country's ever produced, and you took it to a higher level, and you don't have the right to take it to your grave. So get out there and Charlie Mike, get your story out, and continue the mission and train young troops. And let's get our kids back and let's start teaching. And so that's when, and then I said, well, you know, and I started talking. He says, what did I say? I'm on transmit, you're on receive, Charlie Mike, and he hung up. And 4 days later, he crossed over, okay, into the spirit world. And so he didn't get to see me go in the Ranger Hall of Fame, but once I got in, then he gave me orders on his deathbed to get my story out and to Charlie Mike and start teaching. And that's what I'm doing now. And I'm continuing the mission. And just like Dale is, continuing the mission and making awareness to the American people that this country needs its people back, and we need our kids back. I shot my first weapon, I shot my first squirrel when I was 5 years old with a .410 shotgun my grandfather gave me for my 5th birthday. And everything I shot, I had to eat, or we ate at dinner table. We don't kill anything that we don't need. We don't waste food. So that's the values I had. I was brought up that way, the old pioneer ways, the right way. And throughout my career as an adolescent, I already knew the safety of the weapons. I knew how to shoot them. I had the responsibility of it. And if I didn't, and I misused that responsibility, I had my actions. I had to be responsible for my actions and what the consequences that brought my actions in. So I had to pay for it, you know, and I learned at a young age. Where our kids nowadays don't learn from a young age. They're too busy. They're not out hunting. They're not out there playing in the woods. They're not out there out and playing cowboys and Indians and stuff. They're in there on the couch potatoes playing the videos, okay? And our parents, in a way, it's our economy that's the fast lane. It takes both parents to make a living nowadays, so the kids suffer. You know, a lot of times it's not the parents' fault, but you still have that responsibility, okay, as a mother and a father. It's the greatest responsibility there is. You know, and I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be 1% of the 1%ers. And I will fight anybody that says different. And I don't care who they are. I am not going to let my grandkids and my future ancestors, my futures, to be living underneath tyranny. I refuse it. And I will fight. I took that oath of allegiance to America to protect the Constitution of the United States and we the people from any foreign or domestic enemies. Plain and simple. And that's the only oath I've ever taken in my life, was that oath right there. And I'll die for it. And we had a lot of our fallen comrades that's died for it. So let's get our respect back and let's get America back. And God bless us all. We are Americans.